Hello everyone, welcome to this evening's webinar, Insect Folklore with Kaitlyn Elverson. This is the last webinar in our winter webinar series. How many more times can I say webinar? So we've had a good run of successful events with some great speakers. We kicked off with Dave Golson, and he was talking about insect declines. It then went on to Bridget Strawbridge, who talked about wildlife gardening and what we can do in our own gardens to help pollinators and other wildlife. Last week we had Jeff Ollerton, who was talking about how flowers behave to attract their pollinators, which was really fascinating. And tonight we have our very own Kaitlyn, who is talking about insect folklore, and this is part of her interest with nature connection, alternative routes of connecting to nature and knowledge of nature, and how historically and through legend it has fitted into our cultures. Kaitlyn actually did a webinar for us quite a few months ago now, last summer, I believe, and that was on the folklore of trees and some of our flowering plants. So if you want to check that out, it's on our YouTube channel, and this will also be put on our YouTube channel after the event this evening. So I will just say we are recording. I will pass over to Kaitlyn soon. There will be time at the end for any questions. Please do, this is a folklore webinar, and what we're really interested in is your local tales of what's going on around you. So if you've got any stories, put them in the chat and we'll see if we've got time to read them at the end, and of course any questions in the chat. I will keep monitoring the waiting room, and for now, Kaitlyn, I will pass over to you if that's okay.
Of course, thank you very much, Kate, for the lovely introduction. Yes, please, if you've got any folklore stories, or you're inspired to tell your own about specific insects we talk about this evening, or other ones that aren't mentioned, yeah, please, we'd love to hear about them. We had some fantastic ones at the tree and plant one as well. And especially, you know, from everybody that's not in the UK, it'd be lovely to hear what you've got in other countries from around the world that's folklore related, insect or not. So I thought we would give you first of all, we'll start off with a brief introduction to what beelines are in general, what the Severn B-Lines Project is, and how Kate and I fit into Buglife and what we've been up to over the last nearly a year or so. So yes, welcome to the talk, everybody. Why are we not? There we go. Okay, we're moving on. Technical issues are always the bane of existence, aren't they, on these things? Anyway, yes, Buglife are, or formerly known as the Invertebrate Conservation Trust. So we changed around early 2000s to, hopefully you will agree, the much better and catchier Buglife. We are the only organisation in Europe devoted to the conservation of all invertebrate species, and that also includes marine and freshwater as well, not just the ones on the ground that we would normally see day to day. Our general aim is to stop invertebrate extinctions and achieve sustainable populations of invertebrates. No small task, but apart from you know, a few other projects, we've got lots of buzzing projects local to towns and cities around the UK. But one of the other main projects or frameworks that Buglife has in place are beelines. So what are beelines? Well, the B stands for biodiversity, so not just for insects, but for the biodiversity of all wildlife throughout the UK. So the beelines are a result of a 10-year mapping process where they connected up all specialist sites of wildflower importance or pollinator importance all over the UK, and you know, put all of that data from national and local data sets into a map, into a program, and that's what you see here with all the lovely red lines going on throughout the UK, from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and even, you know, some of the little Scottish Isles at the top there. They're 3 kilometers wide, and basically within those they connect up, like I said, wildflower habitat, and the goal is to fill them with more wildflower habitat. And if we manage to just fill up 10% of these pollinator highways, as they already exist, we feel just 10% of them, we will start to see habitat connectivity, which is the ultimate goal of Beelines, to allow movement for pollinators and insects, and all wildlife throughout the UK through wild and green open spaces, to benefit pollinators and people alike. We could all use a bit more of wild and open green spaces. So Severn B-Lines is just one example of some of the Beelines projects that are going on in around all over the UK at the minute. We've got some going up in Scotland, Wales, and one that's recently just started down in Cornwall, and North Devon, I think, in that kind of area. But Severn B-Lines, what Kate and I are representing, is funded by the DEFRA Green Recovery Challenge Fund, and which is administered by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we're based in Shropshire. So this map that you can see here with these red squiggly lines all over it represents the Shropshire Beelines of the map. So if you were to go onto the Buglife website and click on our work, go to Beelines, you would see that lovely map of the UK, and you can zoom in and find the Shropshire Beelines, and also Beelines for your local areas too. So we're an on-the-ground project, and our aim is to create and restore a beautiful network of flower-rich habitats, and wildflowers specifically, to benefit local communities and also pollinators. We've been working with some fantastic communities and people. We've been creating and restoring these habitats through amenity grassland, parks, schools, with private estates, pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you can imagine that we can get our hands on. Our delivery partner for this project has been the Shropshire Wildlife Trust, and we've been working collaboratively with Telford and Wrekin Council, Bridgnorth Town Council, Dawley specifically in Telford, with creating a pollinator garden there. All over the place. And as you can see on the map, we've been mostly working from around Bridgnorth up to Telford, and kind of with some private estates going on over slightly more Shrewsbury way and up here, along that part of the Beeline. And so far we've created about 8.5 hectares of wildflower rich grassland, and we've got loads more coming up, or to be created this month and the coming months, just before the project ends in June this year. But yes, like I've said, it doesn't just end and start in Shropshire, and it definitely doesn't stop with Buglife. Obviously we've got loads of other amazing organisations and charities throughout the UK that are essentially striving for the same thing. We all want more habitat for insects and for wildlife in general. But a key message of the Beelines is putting people at the heart of the project. And as you can see here, obviously you've got a few lovely photos of Kay and I there showing off our stalls and our plug plants that we've had at volunteer days. But you can see also, quite a lot of people in these photos as well, from workshops to guided walks and talks, volunteer days, where we've been spreading green hay and spreading wildflower seed and plug planting. We need your help, and we need your help in Shropshire and for the whole Beelines framework as well. And the main aim of getting you guys on board is to encourage you to add your own project or add your own little thing, whatever you're doing, to the Beelines, the online Beelines map. And making your pollinator pledges as well, so what you're going to do for pollinators this year and for many years to come. So if you've got something going on your local school, maybe you're a teacher, or you've got something going on in your local community, or you've got just you're planting pollinator friendly plants in your garden, we want to hear about it. Or from anything like that on the list there, bee hotels or green roofs, absolutely anything. We want it on the map, and yes, we want to know about it. So we've already got about 2,500 dots or little projects listed on the map at the minute, and hopefully after this evening we'll have inspired a lot more to be added there very soon. As I mentioned before, that's the link there, but you can easily find this map on the Buglife website. And we do have a Severn B-Lines e-newsletter that can go out to people, and I'm sure we'll add a link in there in the chat if anybody would like to sign up to that to learn more about what to do to add your project to the Beeline, and keep up to date with what the Severn B-Lines project is up to. That's all for the Beeline side of things. So I would like to officially welcome you all to Folklore of Insects. So the purpose of today's talk is, I suppose, to be more of a relaxed kind of walkthrough through insect stories and a bit of their history and obviously their folklore, their lore around surrounding them, and hopefully inspire you to learn a little bit more about them, and to maybe think about them a little bit differently than you might already do. And also we'll talk a little bit about the role that insects play in our lives in general. So who am I? I know Kate's given me a really lovely little introduction at the start, but there's me with our family's Bernese mountain dog Gus. I wish he could be here this evening helping me out, but unfortunately he's not. He's down in Cornwall with my parents, but he probably actually wouldn't be that helpful anyway for this webinar. But my background is in wildlife conservation. I studied at Nottingham Trent University, and my key interests are environmental education, public engagement, and also more recently a passion that's developed is nature connection, and it's kind of sparked me to want to talk about these things with you. I've been all sorts of things as a career. I've been a storyteller at the Eden Project. I worked in customer service. I've been a Christmas elf, obviously more recently, and now a Beelines intern. My interest in invertebrates, I guess, kind of started also at university when I decided to do my dissertation on jellyfish, which of course are also invertebrates, and I fell in love with them so quickly. They're weird and wonderful, but they have so much knowledge to share with us, and they're just fantastic creatures. I absolutely love them. And I definitely didn't think, going from that experience, that I would be working in an invertebrate conservation setting. I love insects, but it definitely wasn't the thing that I kind of envisioned myself doing. But now having learned so much more about them and how wonderful they are, I would never go back to not knowing anything about them. But as a Beelines intern, I wanted to try and reach some new audiences, and raise awareness for nature connection, and how we interact with nature and what it means to us, basically. And I kind of wanted to put into perspective why we engage with it, how we currently engage for it, what it does for us, and how nature actually inspires us. It's hopefully why we're here today. I love nature, and hopefully that's why you're all here listening along this evening as well. But nature connection, just to put this into a little bit of perspective, and provide some definitions. Nature connection is the extent to which individuals include nature as part of their identity, and that includes the good and the bad. It's fantastic to go out into nature and see its beauty, see all in its glory. But it also includes the way that we, interact with nature through the sad things as well. For example, I have quite a few friends at the minute that have, felt quite a lot of grief for seeing all of the trees that have been, pulled down by these, horrible winds and storms that we've had recently. But even though that feeling, that emotion is very sad, and it's like I said, it's kind of a feeling of grief, it shows that we care for nature, and I think it's an important feeling to have. It shows how we are connected to it, and you know how much we do want to help it and you know save it as best we can. And it's easy to forget what nature means to us and the benefits that it can give to us, you know, for our physical health, you know, going for a nice stroll in nature, but also our mental well-being as well. So I kind of wanted to bring us all back to a feeling this evening of feeling empowered and brave and excited about nature and how we connect with it. And an easy way to do that is through folklore. So folklore, made up of two words, and folk obviously meaning people and lore meaning stories, is the traditional beliefs, customs, stories of a community that are generally passed on through generations by word of mouth. But obviously some stories can be written. You know, it's an easy way to emphasize how important nature has been culturally and historically to us throughout, you know, probably since the beginning of time, really. And folklore is absolutely everywhere. You know, just maybe have a look at the screen now and see if you can notice or, you know what any of these different things mean. Folklore, you know, is extremely important to us, and you know, from old wives' tales to fairy tales, myths and legends, they all have some bearing on our lives or work their way into our lives in some way. I like to think of folklore as lessons that don't require teachers, and they're generally used to show us how we make sense of the world. So maybe just to walk you through a few things. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite stories, of, you know, inspired by fantasy, and a lot of lore from, you know, ancient cultures or ancient peoples, that kind of thing, you know, elves and all that kind of stuff. The picture in the middle there is King Arthur. That's in Tintagel, the castle down in Cornwall. Taylor Swift, any of you Swifties out there, she's just released an album, you know, not long released her folklore album. If any of you play D&D or any role-playing games, or maybe some just like fantasy games, whether, you know, or video game style things, they're all inspired by lore, or, you know, those old tales that we all know and love. Fairy tales, especially, you know, the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, they could be considered folklore. You know, we all know those stories. It's universally available is what I'm getting at here, and every culture, every person localized has their own folklore, but generally they all have something in common. They're moral lessons that can be quite profound and obviously sometimes quite dark and a bit creepy, but they're essentially things that instill morals in us, that tell us life lessons. I'm sure, you know, feel free to comment if you can think of any tales from your childhood that your parents told you, or if you're like me and you just loved watching Disney films, you know, the traditional ones like, you know, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, they're all based on those, you know, Brothers Grimm stories. Folklore gives us a chance to reflect on what the world, you know, what our cultures mean, what history means to us, and also nature. A lot of folklore is based in nature. It connects us all through stories that are creative and imaginative, and, you know, it connects us all to one another. And, you know, I love folklore, and it's generally just a lot of fun to find out where it's from, and, you know, a bit more about history and you know, local peoples from all over the world. So let's take a deep dive in now that we've had that, you know, brief introduction to everything. So today we're going to talk about some insects as a whole, so, you know, from butterflies, bees, and all that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about the general symbolism. Some have their own little stories that I'm going to share with you, and let's just dive in. So first of all, I thought I'd start with, you know, the one that everybody see, you know, we all love seeing a lovely little bee. These pictures here are from some buff-tailed bumblebees, sorry, I'm messing up on my bees, that are just, you know, having a little snack on some flowers there. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you that bees hold great importance ecologically and economically. you know, they're vital for farmers, anyone growing crops or food plants all over the world. They're the poster child for pollination, really. It's the one that everybody thinks of when we think of pollinators and what nectar and pollen, all that kind of stuff. You think of a little bee bumbling around or buzzing around the countryside. And of course, honey as well, though not all bees produce honey, specifically honeybees. And their general symbolism kind of represents, I suppose, what a bee is, you know, what they provide. They relate to fertility and sexuality because of pollination. It's, you know, quite a beautiful process for creating life, essentially. The ancient Druids saw the bee as a symbol of the sun goddess, providing light upon the world, and as a result, kind of provided them with a sense of community, and they were used to symbolize celebration. And you know, the sun in itself, you know, we see yellow in the color of the bee, and the Druids especially saw this as a symbol of the light that they provide to the world, the sun itself and the bees. And obviously without the sun, without natural light, we wouldn't be able to sustain life as we know it. And the bees kind of, you know, work into that kind of thinking. Bee symbolism often shows up when we're thinking about goals or focus. Bees themselves are very hard workers. They, you know, barely stop throughout the day, and such. It's kind of said that when you see bees, they're kind of assigned for you to focus on particular aspects of your life that maybe you're procrastinating a little bit from, or just require a little bit more determination to get you through. And bees are there to tell you that you can do it with a little bit of hard work. The Celts, both modern and ancient, honor this marvelous little creature. And bees are a great symbol of wisdom and hold great importance to them and a lot of cultures around the world, or people. They've regarded the bees as spiritual messengers, from the other world, passing their wisdom on from the other side to us. And people, as a consequence, would try and capture the bee to learn of their wisdom and what they were wanting to share with us in the world. People also treated bees as they were part of the family. You had to tell the bee of everything that excuse me, everything that was going on. If any main events, if somebody was having a party, if it was somebody's birthday, if somebody was getting married, the bees had to know. And it was seen as a bit of you know, kind of, it was a bad luck brought to you if you didn't inform the bees of major events. And it was thought to bring, you know, bad luck upon you, that maybe the bees might stop, the honeybees especially, might stop producing that honey, or they would leave the hive altogether, or leave the area altogether if you kind of disgrace them in a way by not telling them what was going on. And Cornish folklore especially emphasizes that the beekeepers themselves should be the ones to inform the bees of what's going on. And if the beekeeper should pass away, then his spouse or her spouse should take over the duty, or it should pass to the next in line in the family. And they would have to introduce themselves to the bees and inform them of what was going on, but they have to be polite about it as well. And similar themes of them being messengers, or, you know, quite important as part of the family, or quite close to people, even date back to the Romans. The Romans would avoid swarms of bees, not maybe for the reason that you think they would. I'm sure, you know, none of us want to go near a swarm of bees, but they thought, again, that they were the messages from beyond the grave, and but they kind of feared them in that regard, thinking that they were quite you know, possibly sending some morbid kind of omens their way. And even the ancient Egyptians believed that bees were made or created from the tears of the sun god Ra, to act as little messengers and to share his wisdom or Ra's wisdom, sorry, I should say, with the world and with the people. But overall, bees are generally good luck. So it's especially nice if you see one. And I'm sure you might see quite a few, kind of emerging as the weather's getting a little bit nicer. So let's move on to another one of our favorite little creatures, another pollinator. But I think we can all agree that butterflies are just beautiful little things. They're so delicate and so precious. And there are very few that I think are just plain Janes, and they all have beautiful colours and patterns on their wings, and again have huge ecological significance, being pollinators and obviously having that very key function that we need them for. But generally, butterflies throughout kind of spans all cultures and histories and everything. They represent life and souls, but generally transformation and spiritual rebirth. And that symbolism is essentially rooted in what their life cycle is. If you can imagine a butterfly transforming from a caterpillar into its adult state, from emerging from its chrysalis, it kind of reflects, I suppose, when we in life have our own transformations, or whether literal or metaphorical or spiritual. I'm sure we've all gone through some sort of massive change in our lives. One that I suppose is a little bit of more modern kind of trivia about these is if you've seen the Disney's film Encanto. I absolutely love it. I consider it one of their best films. But in that, I won't spoil it in case you do want to watch it, but there is a lot of butterfly symbolism in that, and that in the film kind of is symbolizes what's going on with the characters in the story. So maybe next time when you watch it, or if you do get the chance to watch it, keep an eye out for the butterflies and how they pop up kind of all around the characters and all around sets in the film. Another little thing that the butterflies are associated with is that if you capture one, or manage to maybe have one in your house and set it free, or free it from a little, whether it's a bit stuck or needs a bit of a hand, it will grant you a wish, which is quite nice. So my advice would be, maybe if you find a butterfly in your house, and it's quite a cold day, sometimes a lot of insects will try and come in the house or your houses for warmth, try and calm it down a little bit, and then set it free on a nice calm and sunny day, or hopefully the next morning if it's in the evening, and you never know if the butterfly might kind of thank you in return for helping it out a little bit and give you a little wish. They're very prolific in Irish folklore, and again directly related to the soul, and it's actually considered bad luck to kill a white butterfly in particular, as they represent the souls, or it's thought that these butterflies are carrying the souls of the deceased with them, to pass to the other side, the other world, and so in Ireland especially, they were thought to had to keep a bit of an eye on them, because they were known for their ability to pass between this world and the next. I thought at this point I would share with you a particular story that I think it includes butterflies in it. Some of you might have heard of it. It's considered somewhat of a literary classic for Irish and Celtic kind of classics works. And it's about Aelaine, or she's sometimes called Aelaine through different stories, or whatever story that you might come across or read about. But she led quite a marvelous life, an extraordinary life. She was a beautiful woman who found herself tangled in a somewhat unfortunate situation, kind of found between two lovers, torn between two lovers 1,000 years apart. The story itself has quite a lot of intricate details in it, so forgive me if I miss any out, but I thought I would just kind of provide you with an overview of the story this evening, and if you would like to explore it a bit more yourself and maybe learn about the characters and the setting a bit more, then please feel free to do so after this webinar, or whenever you fancy. So if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to read you some of the story, or an abridged version of the story. Aelaine was the daughter of a king, and is often described as having shimmering waves of fire golden hair, skin as white as snow, and blushing cheeks as red as foxgloves. Her eyes were said to be a vibrant, unnatural blue, and her shape considered to be as wavy as sea foam. Such a beautiful woman. She is quite literally the standard of beauty to which all Irish women are held. And because of this beauty, she found herself in a bit of a difficult way. One of Aelaine's suitors was Medea. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these names right. Please feel free to tell me if I'm not in the comments. But this Medea was a member of the fairy race, and he was first wed to a woman called Fionnach, and he found himself smitten with Aelaine, obviously at this stage a beautiful human woman. And he chose to woo and wed Aelaine as his second wife, with the aid of his foster son Angus, who basically owed him a little bit for favour. So he kind of almost adopted him into his family. He weds Aelaine with the permission of her father, the king. And Aelaine quickly became the favourite of Medea, and it kind of, left scorned. Fionnach did everything that she could to rid herself and her husband of this mortal. She casts numerous spells upon her, transforming her first into a pool of water, then a worm, and then finally into a butterfly. As a butterfly, however, Aelaine remains close to her husband, who finds that he loves her dearly, even though not knowing that it is his wife. And he takes the butterfly with him wherever he goes, and soon he loses all desire for womanly company and his wife's company, the Fionnach, altogether. And as a result, Fionnach forces Aelaine away, by creating a wind to blow her away for 7 years, a fearsome gust of wind. Though lost, Aelaine finds her way back with the help of Medea's foster son, Angus. And Angus himself recognises Aelaine in her butterfly form, and he keeps him in with her in a little kind of carry case, and keeps her safe whenever he goes on his travels. But Fionnach, of course, finds out that Aelaine is alive and she's back, and creates yet another wind to blow her away for another 7 years, this time forcing her to land in the goblet of the wife of Itar, the Ulster chieftain, or the king of the Ulster, the clan. And the queen unknowingly swallows Aelaine within the goblet of wine, and she finds herself pregnant. She becomes pregnant with Aelaine, who is famously reborn, as she's given birth, birth a second time 1,000 years after her first birth. She remembers nothing of her old life, and eventually weds Echoed. Forgive me again if this is pronounced wrong, but he's the High King of Ireland. Medea, her old husband, finds Aelaine again, and in an attempt to win back his wife, he approaches the High King in human form and gambles away various riches. He tries to win back his old wife through various sorts of treasures and persuasions. And the king, eventually knowing what Medea wants, he kind of sets him a series of tasks which Medea completes successfully. And as kind of his prize, his treasure, he gets to he demands a kiss off Aelaine. And when he does, instead of giving her just a kiss, he embraces her very tightly, and so much so that she remembers their former life together, and she allows him to whisk her away, and they live happily together in the fairy world. So that's the story of Aelaine. As I said, there's a little bit more to it after that goes on with the king, but we don't have quite time to go into all the details now. But basically, Aelaine's story stands as a tale of rebirth and new life. the significance of the butterfly in this myth is to show that we can't waste the opportunities of transforming, and they stand as opportunities, as parts of our life that are sometimes necessary to move on and, you know, find where we're supposed to be. So I quite like that story. I think it's a beautiful classic, and again, please feel free to learn more about it, because I definitely haven't done it justice this evening. Moving on to the butterflies, quite close cousins, obviously quite well related, are moths. They're generally not the most popular insects. I'm sure if I asked you to, you know, show of hands, how many of you might not consider moths as nice as butterflies or many other insects. And this kind of extends into their lore as well, or maybe we think of them as a result of the lore about them. They're typically viewed as like messengers or symbols of death or the dead. But some symbolism does kind of cross over to the butterfly as well. Some folklore does see them as nice things, not just horrible things, but generally kind of the association is that butterflies are seen as fairies, they're seen as sprites, you know, quite nice things, whereas moths are you know, pesky little things, or they're seen as witches. And so appear in art and literature as bad omens. You know, quite famously, we have obviously, you know, if you're a horror fan, the Silence of the Lambs poster that features the death's head hawk moth on it, which, you know, I think is quite a beautiful moth, but obviously now is the symbol of, you know, the horrible franchise of horrible film or horror film, if you do like them. In Cornish folklore, if anybody has been to the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle, would highly recommend it if you do get to go down there at any point. There is a section in there that talks about piskies, and these are kind of similar to pixies, but they're thought to be a bit more mischievous and not as nice as their friends or their relatives, the pixies. And you know, moths are kind of were, especially in Truro in their folklore, were considered to be, you know, these piskies were moths, or, you know, you would see them flying about at night and causing some mischief or chaos, and were also thought, especially when in numerous or a lot of numbers, were thought to be an omen of death or great mortality. So generally the moths kind of get a really bad name for it, and I think generally they're kind of just a little bit misunderstood. You know, they come out at night and we don't really get to see them in their full beauty, whereas if you would just let me explain a little bit, or maybe stand up for moths, one that you might know about is unfortunately not native to the UK, but is the lunar moth, and I've mentioned this one because it stands as such a powerful representation of the feminine divine, of beauty, of such a deep spiritual connection for a moth as well, which is, you know, quite surprising considered that they're thought to be horrible. But the lunar moth, just to maybe describe it, a bit of its life cycle, it's named after, or thought to be named after, Luna, the Roman moon goddess. It's one of the largest species of moth in North America, where it's native to, and it only lives for about a week in its adult stage and has no mouth, and so its sole purpose is to kind of to just reproduce in its life cycle and then die. They're often spotted at night, and they're drawn to the moon, and as I said, they have the huge spiritual ties, and they're considered to be a very powerful animal spirit guide. And found quite a beautiful kind of summary when I was looking at this, that she speaks of the connection to the feminine, our inner spirit, and our trust in ourselves. We learn of the importance to find balance between light and dark, the seen and the unseen, and she, the lunar moth, is a reminder that when all is said and done, our healing and sense of love are the ultimate journey. The caterpillar and its metamorphosis into the moth is a spiritual metaphor, much like that of the butterfly. And the lunar moths signify new beginnings, as they represent a continuing quest for truth and knowledge, the gift of intuition, psychic perception, and heightened awareness. And I'm sure you agree, a far more beautiful representation of moths. And we too in the UK, if you know a fellow UK resident, we also, hopefully you'll know that we also have some beautiful moth in the UK. The elephant hawk moth, with its really vibrant colours, is beautiful, and I would argue maybe beautiful than some butterflies. So hopefully we can try and break that stigma of what moths are being associated with, and how they're maybe not the favourites of the insects. And maybe I've added this in here just to maybe a little bit of humour, and provide some modern folklore, I suppose you could say, or modern urban legends. Maybe you've heard of the Mothman. It was a bit of a phenomenon in the 60s that people were reporting sightings of a mysterious creature, and he would be described as with huge wings, with a weird kind of humanoid body, would have huge red eyes, and would have a very high-pitched kind of shriek, and would just kind of look monstrous all in all. Some people would say that he had bird-like wings, but most of all, kind of this representation of the Mothman came about because people would describe him with insect-like kind of features, these massive bulging eyes that I suppose you consider most insects to have. And these pictures here are just some of the things that you might see if you've been to Point Pleasant in West Virginia. And there is a Mothman museum. There's plenty of cafes that sport Mothman pizzas and cookies and stuff like that. And the town even has a statue to represent the Mothman, because he's become somewhat of a modern urban legend and figure for tourism in town. Does he have any actual really ties to moths? We don't know, but could the Mothman have gained his name or this reputation if not for the associations that we have with moths being creepy and weird? Who knows? I thought it was just a little fun thing to put in there. And if you would like to learn a bit more about that, there is a great BuzzFeed Unsolved video on the Mothman. So that's on YouTube, so please go check it out. It's just a bit of a laugh. I thought we'd move on next to ladybirds. Same with butterflies and bees, and a lot of the other insects we've talked about tonight. We all love ladybirds, don't we? They're generally considered symbols of good luck, good fortune, and love and innocence, all those nice, positive, lovely things. There's some here just on some cute little forget-me-nots, just kind of having a little bumble over them. They kind of symbolize good decisions in a lot of their symbolism. They're heralds of good news. They bring comfort and joy, and then spread this joy around to wherever they go. They're generally considered as lucky charms, and generally they pose really no threat to humans. And for that kind of association, they're generally regarded quite positively. According to Norse beliefs, the ladybug actually had pretty heavy metal origin, and first came to Earth in a shard of lightning when the god Freya called her, or called the ladybug, and that's how they came to be. And I can out of all the insects that you've heard about this evening, that's pretty hardcore. They were also maybe not so nicely prescribed for medicine for toothache and measles and colic, kind of back in the day. And they were thought to be able to carry away illnesses and make wishes come true. And if one happens to land on your hand, then you're said to be married within the year. The origin of the name is quite interesting. I think the Beatles of Our Lady. English folklore kind of tells of a story from the Middle Ages, where there was a bit of a plague of insects that were devastating farmers' crops, and kind of leaving the people in a bit of a bind with their harvest. So the people, they prayed to the Virgin Mary and asked her for a sign, or to help them. in their troubling times. And quite quickly after their prayers, a horde of ladybirds came across their crops and completely wiped out all of these pest insects that were devastating their crops, and therefore they had a successful harvest that year. And so after the Virgin Mary, who they thought saved them, she was named the Beetles of Our Lady, which quickly then eventually turned into lady beetles, and then obviously ladybird, ladybug, and the way that we think of them today. Though in all their good luck, you quite rightly imagine that it's also very bad luck to harm a ladybird. And it's said that all sorts of bad things will happen to you if you kill one or harm one in any way. But again, like some of our other lovely butterflies and bee friends, maybe if you help one out, they might provide some good luck your way, or give you a wish to grant or something like that. Ants are, I guess, one of those insects that we think about maybe a little bit strangely. I don't have a phobia of ants, but they're not my favorite as insect goes. I think it's one of the Indiana Jones films. I think it's one of the most recent ones where there's ants that pull a person down into their anthill, and they obviously eat him, which I obviously know isn't true. But I remember watching that when I was a bit younger and thinking, oh gosh, I don't like ants then. But actually they're very, very interesting little creatures, and they're very determined, very resilient, and that kind of follows over into their folklore and their symbolism as well. They represent determination, and because of how they work and how they work in teams to collect food and protect their nests, they kind of act as a reminder that nothing comes easy in life, and that we too should be resilient like them, and without a bit of hard work, where would we get in life? They're kind of found all over the world, living in a variety of habitats and conditions, and their colonies, if you've ever seen the inner structure of an anthill, I'm sure you agree that it's possibly one of the most amazing or fascinating structures in nature. And also, therefore it becomes the ant becomes a symbol of industrial creativity and dynamism as well, to be able to create these structures after being such a tiny thing. They can travel long distances to bring food and water back to their nests, and can carry something like 20 times their own weight. And obviously you've probably seen videos of them joining together to cross ponds of water. They're just fascinating. And spiritually, their meaning is hard work and perseverance, discipline, all those things that keep us going in life. They act as a bit of a messenger of to say keep going, and stick with it, and endurance is a good thing, and good things will come to those who wait. Ants mainly feature, well, it's quite surprising to see that they feature quite strongly in indigenous cultures, particularly that of Native Americans. And the ant and the bear is a story I'm going to share with you this evening. And it's a story of how daylight came to be. And I think it's actually one of my most favourite stories that I've discovered since learning about all of this. And it's specifically from the Tuana people. Again, apologies if pronunciation. But they were a collective of indigenous tribes along the Pacific Northwest coast of Canada and the US. And so I thought we would wrap up the lore and story portion of the evening with telling you a little bit of a story of the ant and the bear. So the story goes a little bit like this. Long ago, so long ago that there was no light and there was only darkness. In those days, the ant people worked very hard, and they would go looking for food and sometimes get lost in the darkness. Sometimes they would hear heavy giant footsteps of a monster that would get into their homes and steal away their babies and would disappear again off into the darkness. This monster was the grizzly bear. And there was one person, the ant woman, who was smarter than all the rest. And she said, if we had light, we would be able to see and find our way home. We would also watch out for the monster bear who steals our children. And she decided to go to the house of the creator and ask for light on behalf of her people. And it was a long and dangerous journey, but eventually she arrived. But she did not know it, that the bear followed her to see what she was up to and what she was doing. And when she arrived, the ant woman asked of her creator, give my people light so we can see and work. But before she could finish speaking, Bear stepped in front and said, well, don't listen to her. Don't give this little bug what she wants. I want it to be dark so I can sleep and be cool and be happy. And to which the creator replied that to settle this matter, there will be a contest, a dance contest, and the winner will get his or her desire. And the contest began, and all kinds of creatures, big and small, came to witness, bringing with them all sorts of food and offerings to share with one another as they watched the contest. And as soon as Bear noticed all of the different types of food, he became very excited and began to eat. But little ant woman, she fasted and she concentrated on praying on behalf of her people, and pulled her belt tighter and tighter around her waist so she wouldn't feel hungry. And finally, it was time to compete. She stood up and she told the people, I am the ant woman and I dance for light. And so she did a little fast dance, pulling her belt tighter and tighter around her waist as she did. When she had finished, Bear stood up and wiped the crumbs from his lips and said, I am the bear and I dance for night. And he did his slow and lumbering dance. And when he finished, he went back to eating and tucking into all of the food. 4 days and 4 nights they danced. And Ant Woman, during this time, she continued to fast and pray. She did not eat at all, and pulling her belt tighter and tighter as she did. Bear stood up to dance against her, but on the last night he was so fat and so full from all the food that he'd been eating that he could hardly move, and he was so tired and sleepy, and he quickly fell asleep in the middle of his dance and began to snore quite loudly. The creator announced that the little ant has won, but I see the plights of both my children, that the ant and the bear, I love and care for them equally. And for that reason, I will give them both what they wish for. Daylight for the ant people, so that they can see and work and help and to protect themselves. And nighttime for the bear, so that he remains cool and he can sleep. And today, we have day and night because of this wonderful little ant woman and her story to help her people. So maybe if you see an ant today, you'll notice that they have a little tiny waist, and so then you will know that this story is true. So I do hope that you really enjoyed that story. It is one of my favorites. And to tie this all together, why are we talking about this evening? Why have I just rambled on to you about some fantastic folk stories, and why is it a conservation charity talking about it this evening? Well, every connection that we have or interest that we have begins with curiosity and wonder. It develops into an interest or so much so as a passion. And without this passion for, let's say, nature, how do we want to pursue a career in conservation or help the insects or help the wildlife around us or where we live? How do we become environmentalists? Or want to speak on behalf of nature? Folklore offers an easy way in, by telling stories and showing people the wonder and the awe of the world around them. And even from the tiniest bug to the largest animal to the grandest ecosystem, so that the largest habitat, everything is important. Everything is significant. Insects, you know, as small as they are, they're often signed off as, you know, gross or weird or insignificant, and are, you know, as we found out with some of them this evening, generally misunderstood. And if we could spread the wonder of their backstories, of what they've done for us, and, you know, their knowledge, their lore, their history, hopefully we can inspire people to think differently about them. And hopefully, you know, that brings awareness to the greater things as well, at least in the involvement in conservation and nature, all those things that, you know, as a conservation charity, we're trying to promote. So without these tiny creatures, the world just kind of wouldn't be the same, I think, figuratively and literally. You know, often what they do goes unseen, and whether you want to consider them as spiritual messages or guides, protagonists of stories, or just amazing creatures that live on the earth with us, they remain important, and they remain as signs of hope or prosperity, good luck, or good fortune, transformation, everything that we've discussed this evening. We rely on them for so many things, even though, you know, most of the time we don't see what's going on, and yet we remain scared of some of them or wary of some of them, when perhaps instead we should focus on marveling at them and seeing what they do for us, learning about them more, respecting them and passing on their stories and their knowledge, or the science of what they do for the world. And hopefully today, by learning more about them, you will start to notice them more, and hopefully when you either see a butterfly or a bee or a dragonfly or a moth or a wasp even, you will think of them instead not as just insects or weird things, but you'll think back to their symbolism and their wonderful stories, and think about what they have to teach us, and let them guide you through your life. So I hope today that you've been inspired by their stories, and will continue to share their centuries old stories for many more years to come. Thank you very much for listening and for watching this evening. Yes, I do hope that you've all learned something new. And before I just pass over to Kate again to talk about some questions, or talk about some folklore things that have been going on in the chat as I've been speaking. Here are just some really good books that I would recommend. A couple of which, or you know, the two big ones of which that I've helped me in putting some of this talk together this evening. Lore of the Wild, Folklore Wisdom. It's a fantastic book, especially for families and children. It's got some beautiful pictures in there, beautiful imagery. Bugs Britannica is a bit of a chunkier book, but if you want to learn more about species specifically, and you know, a lot more about them in great detail, then that is the book for you. Tree Wisdom by Jacqueline Memory Patterson is, I think, it just a lovely book, and folklore especially, and obviously not insects, but maybe want to get you started if you're interested in folklore as in general about nature, and also maybe a fun one that might make quite a good gift for somebody who is big into their folklore or superstition or ghosts and that kind of a thing. I have one myself that was given as a gift to me, is the folklore and superstition map, which I think you can, you know, find just as easily as you can any of the other books. And I think we've got plenty of time for some questions or to have a quick discussion. But if you have any pressing things that you would like to talk to me about, then please, you know, there's my email. Please feel free to contact me, and I'll be of service or help as much as I can. And with that, Kate, have we had any questions or stories to share this evening, to have a bit of a discussion about?
Hello, I'm here.
She's back.
Yes, we have. We've had some stories come through, some really interesting stuff going on in the chat. Loads of people sharing their stories, but also sharing resources with each other, which is always great to see. just there before the last thing, I think people were prompted by that last image you put up, and I only ask you this because I know you mentioned it the other day, and can probably enlighten us with some folklore about dragonflies.
Yes.
So a couple of people just asked, you know, what is the popular dragon folklore around dragonflies?
I think they obviously generally being around water is where you spot them. They're kind of, they symbolize, I suppose, that kind of meeting of air and water, and maybe not quite to the extent that the butterflies do, but they offer a bit of symbolism around change, and but more of the water side being accepting of the change and embracing it like a water would, like a, you know, air and water are ever flowing and ever present. Dragonflies are kind of a bit more fluid in their lore and that kind of a thing. I don't know any specific lore or tales about them, though if anybody would like to, I'd be happy to add some links after the webinar to some more dragonfly specific stuff. Yeah, very, very welcome to do that.
Great. Okay. There's been lots of generally lovely comments, people loving your enthusiasm. Somebody commenting that it's great to see this kind of engagement, this awe and wonder engagement, I suppose, which is just a nice way of connecting to new audiences from the more traditional kind of engagement activities, which are around obviously identifying, more scientific, I suppose. So yes, there have been some stories shared, so I'll have a little look at them. I've copied and pasted them into a Word document as I went. So we've had some people on, interestingly, we've had some people sharing stories from different cultures. Ryan shared a Cherokee story from the Southeast United States about two hunters sitting by the fire listening to the insects. And one hunter says, I hope I pronounce this right because I'm not sure if I've heard of this insect. He says, "Ha, the katydid, or the katydid. He sings even though he will be dead by winter, and he doesn't even know it." And the katydid changes his song to say, "It is you who will be dead before tomorrow, boastful hunter." And so it was. They were surprised in their arrogance by an enemy raiding party, and he was killed. This is a tale about why you shouldn't mock the meek. So these kind of I suppose, you know, what could you say that was? Tutoring people on their behaviour and respect, and to not take things too much by appearance, maybe. Yeah. Really interesting stuff.
Definitely.
Shan, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly, has been posting some Inuit stories. Oh, and I apologize if I mispronounce anything. So this is an interesting story. When Kiviok was traveling across the Arctic, he happened across the home of a spider woman. He looked into the house and saw the spider woman surrounded by the corpses of men all stacked up. She was stirring her pot, which was filled with human flesh. When Kiviok made a sound, the spider woman looked up at him. Her eyebrows were too long and dangly to see him, so she sliced them off with her ulu and popped them into her mouth. He died from terror, but the spider woman resurrects him. And that's where it ends. I'm not sure if there's more of that story, but obviously an extremely visual story and quite terrifying. So I don't know if there's more to that story, Shan, but yeah, it's intriguing. These often quite dark tales.
I know that there's some rather, yeah, again, maybe quite creepy Inuit stories, but as a whole, I think they're quite beautiful when you do read more about them. And I would really encourage anybody, if you don't know many Indigenous stories, to go read more about them. I think you know, they're as cultures and people, they're hugely important, and I think they protect Indigenous people to protect something like is it 70% of the world's biodiversity, or kind of natural areas. Forgive me if that number's wrong, but yeah, I think their stories are they're so closely related to nature, just as a result of who they are and their history, that they do boast some quite beautiful folklore and stories like that. Yeah, definitely.
Well, Shan has just followed that up in the chat and said, Kiviok has many adventures. Inuit stories are frequently violent, sexual, or scatological. So possibly won't read. Maybe that's an after 9 p.m.
Yes, I think so.
Brilliant. That's something for us to look into, and for people to go away and have a little research of. Yeah, and then there were just lots of lovely comments. I think through history we've almost looked at nature as kind of a mirror for ourselves, haven't we, in ways of managing our feelings and awareness around our own mortality and the death of others. And Karen posted that the Azteca believed butterflies were the souls of children who died in childbirth, and she's just put that learning that changed her life and must have changed the way that she looks at butterflies. It's rather beautiful.
Of course, yeah. I've just
sorry.
Okay. No, I've just found one question. Vera, I think I've just found. I think I spotted it just as I was just entering the question stage, and she's asked, "What do you think about new adaptations about insects, like quite famously the Bee movie?" And seeing obviously the male honeybee is the main character that goes out and collecting honey, whereas obviously that's not an accurate representation of how a hive functions. I think, yes, it's unfortunate that we have things like this in the media that obviously aren't as accurate as they could be. Though, and obviously, the Bee movie, as an example, is a comedy, isn't it? So it's meant to be a little lighthearted. I mean, he falls in love with a human and she falls in love with him, so so I don't think it's very it's more of an in jest, isn't it? However, I do think it's really important that anything that is portrayed about any animal, I think it's got a lot better in media and film and TV and that kind of stuff over recent years, is that they're portrayed as accurately and as scientifically as possible. Obviously, I've seen some fantastic films about animals and about their journeys. I think there's one on Netflix at the minute that's about, I think it's just called Into the Outback or The Outback or something like that. And it's about, the venomous snakes and spiders and scorpions and everything like that in Australia. And I thought that was actually quite well done as a representation of some of those creatures. Again, maybe not as accurate as it could have been, but it's nice to see animals and insects especially being respected in that way, and nice enough to be almost an educational resource. And of course we've got people like David Attenborough and shows like Blue Planet and Green Planet and all those kind of documentaries that come out and do show plants and nature and insects in their full glory. So maybe we should be promoting shows like that, or kind of media like that a lot more, if people want to know more about what they do. And and obviously, like Blue Planet was one of my absolute favorites because I think it really showcased the things under the water that we rarely get to see them doing, unless you maybe go out on a boat or something like that. But not all of us dive, or not all of us can go under the water and see beautiful sights. And it's the same with insects. Some of them are so tiny that we don't see them about. So I do think it's really good to, or important to have that representation, and it be as factual as it can be.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think sometimes representations in films can be very, very damaging. I think famously, and I know it's going away from inverts, but Jaws was quite damaging for like sharks. I think that Bee movie, I do remember I have seen it, and I think even though it's inaccurate, it is fostering a feeling of closeness and nearness and friendliness towards insects. And I think when you're young, the power of those images, like you were saying about seeing the ants in Indiana Jones. See, that's stayed with you. I think the power of imagery when you're young can stay with you, because I remember watching The Mummy, and it had beetles in it which burrowed under your skin, and I just remember being terrified of beetles for years, and that imagery really sticks with you. So I think inaccuracy can be forgivable sometimes if it's, this is just my opinion, if it's going the right way in you know, forging a kind of fondness or friendliness or love towards perhaps something that's typically not seen well.
Yes.
But,
no. Yeah.
There's another. What else have we got? It was interesting. I loved hearing that bees are basically massive gossips.
Yeah.
And that if you were a big gossip, you would definitely try and become the beekeeper of a community.
Yes, that would be the role for you in there. For sure.
And it was just interesting to hear back to Shan was really involved in the chat, and obviously very passionate about these kind of ancient stories and lore, and saying about Inuit lore that bees are actually terrifying shape changers who are especially dangerous for women. So interesting that these, you know, from across the globe there are different interpretations, generally seen positively here.
It's very interesting how, you know, obviously, you know, I've told you just a little bit, but yeah, like you say, how across different lore and different stories, how each character is thought about very differently. And like the moth, for example, obviously, you know, the lunar moth, people you know, consider that to be a beautiful moth, and it, you know, it's at a pinnacle of you know, the feminine and stuff like that. Whereas in the UK, you know, we have that association that they're horrible, or, you know, people don't like them because they're just annoying and they fly in your house and flap in your face, and they're seen as more of a pest. But yeah, it's nice to see that, you know, there is that love for them elsewhere in the world, and I just hope that, you know, we can spread that love around a little bit more for certain insects in particular.
There is another question asking about folklore related to insects. I'm not sure, you might, I suppose these don't tend to be insects associated with the UK that much, so that, but is there any folklore, Kavitha asks, is there any folklore related to cockroaches, scorpions and or spiders?
Spiders, definitely. Again, spiders are one that are considered very bad omens, very bad juju. Mainly because, again, you know, they're creepy, they're a bit scary, and, you know, you have ones that, you know, can kill you if you're not very careful in some parts of the world. But again, there is a rather lovely story. I think you've mentioned to me, Kate. I can't quite think of the origin now off the top of my head, but I think it's a biblical story, actually. It's in the Bible, and it's where a specific character, forgive me, I can't remember the specifics, he hides from some guards, some men trying to kill him, and the spider in this cave weaves her web across the entrance of the cave, and therefore saves him. So, you know, it's kind of, there are always pros and cons to everything, and I found quite an interesting, I think it was a paper and an article of how spiders and other, you know, somewhat, you know, creepy crawlies, as we consider them, feature it quite predominantly and associated with death. And why this is, you know, why have we you know, come up with this kind of relationship with them, and why does nobody like them? Though when you think about it, really, bees look just as weird, butterflies look just as weird, you know, compared to other creatures or other animals that we have on the planet. But we've you know, decided that butterflies are beautiful, and spiders and cockroaches, you know, are horrible. It's you know, I'm happy to, I think I've saved that paper I think it's, again, maybe quite a bit of a morbid topic, but happy to share that resource as well. And that was one thing that I did struggle to find, actually. There's not a lot of openly available research, I suppose, into this topic, and I suppose about the history of where things have come from, like these traditions, or this lore. There's a lot of it goes very far back, like very historical kind of texts and stuff like that. But they're only from maybe very specific cultures. Egypt, I think, like the scarab beetle and stuff like that, or insects like that. They're obviously, kind of almost held in such a high regard. They're quite powerful little insects to ancient Egyptians. So it's it's kind of weird and unfortunate that some have just been thrown in the I hate you pile, and some have been thrown in the let's love them. But yeah,
it's you're right, that story, it was King Herod's soldiers looking for the baby Jesus Christ. And I remember reading it when I was younger, and there was an illustration. It just really captured me at that age. But there's also a comment: in my home country Bulgaria, it said that a spider in your home is a sign you'll have guests and considered a good thing.
Fantastic. See, yeah, that's the kind of thing that we need to hear about with spiders.
Yeah. And here, like, if I find a money spider on me, I've picked it up from my dad, I would just put it in my hair, because it's lucky to have a money spider on you.
Yes.
I never actually take it off. I just put it on my hair.
Yeah, no, and it will bring you good luck. It will bring you good fortune and money. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But I suppose, again, and another one there that I've told that spiders were good luck. So yeah, it's just I suppose it's perception. It's what we're told, what we're brought up to believe as well, isn't it? That yeah, that spiders are bad, that other things are good.
Karen earlier in the chat pointed out that psyche is the ancient Greek word for both soul and butterfly, which is interesting.
Oh, beautiful. Wow.
And then on a light-hearted note, Tony A posted a nursery rhyme, which I actually remember as well. Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire, children all gone, all but one, and her name is Anne, and she crept under the pudding pan.
Fantastic. I love it.
But yeah, it's and I think another thing that people were chatting about before, after you said that some friends felt grief after the trees were blown over in the terrible storms, people were just saying the positive side obviously is that creation of deadwood habitat and those ecological niches for a lot of our important invertebrates. And I know I haven't looked into it, and there's a lot of poetry around that, because it is quite a poetic thing, isn't it? That death and damage and disturbance can actually lead to so much life. So on the good side of that. I think there's still lots of comments coming through, and everyone's had, I think everyone's enjoyed it, and there's lots of stuff in there. A few people have asked us if they could have a copy of the presentation. I'm afraid we can't send out a full copy of the presentation. I do apologize, but this recording will be on YouTube if people want to watch it again, and obviously the slides will be on there, but I'm afraid we can't send out copies to people. Yes, I think unless there's anything else to comment on, I would say that was it. And thank you very much, Kaitlyn, for giving that talk. It really was wonderful, and yeah, just a really interesting way to think about our insects. And I think people have been learned a lot from the talk, and also been given a lot of pointers into other cultures and other stories to go away and do some more research. A couple of people have said that they work in educational outreach and will use some of the stuff that they've learned today in some of their sessions. So yes, very well received.
Fantastic. That's great to hear.
I will say quickly, I've put a link in to our feedback form. It really helps us if you can fill it out. It just enables us to see what people like and what they don't like, and gives us some information to put back to our funders and help us keep running these events and building them into our projects. So I put it in earlier. I think it takes about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'll pop it in again if you have got time, and it will be in a follow-up email that Kaitlyn will send out with some links and some, some of the some of the book recommendations that she's mentioned. It'll be in there as well, but I've popped it in the chat again. If you have got 5 minutes, please do fill it out. It helps us loads, and we get to see what you like and what you don't like, and any suggestions and thoughts for future events and what people might be interested in. We're all ears. Thank you everyone for coming this evening.
No, thank you very much, everybody. It's been lovely, lovely seeing your comments. I will definitely be sure to read them all properly after in just a second as well. But yes, thank you all for coming. Been lovely seeing everybody from all over as well. Thank you very much for joining us. It's fantastic to see people from all over and hearing your stories from all over the world. So yes, have a lovely evening, everybody, and we hope to see you soon again.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.